This is the Two-Tone Uncensored Podcast. Hosts Matt Necrone, Ryan Moreland, and Glenn Lotzenheiser talk everything Tennessee Titans. This show is made for the fans that bleed two-tone blue.
Hey, this is Drew Bennett, and you're listening to Two-Tone Uncensored.
Welcome to Two-Tone Uncensored. I am your host, Ryan Moreland. With me this week, as always, my favorite person in the world this week, Matt Necrone. How you doing, Matt?
Favorite person of everyone's world. I'm doing great. How are you?
I don't know if that's true, but anybody who's a fan of this show, you're definitely going to be on their good side after we announce this news. Glenn, the Ray Childress of podcasting, Lotzenheiser. What's up, Glenn?
I am here to dominate and control your offensive line. I'm going to sack your quarterback, and I'm going to beat the crap out of him.
That's exactly right. That's exactly what he does on the show, too.
I like what you did there.
We have some real quick news before we jump into the show. Obviously, you're going to hear Jim Wyatt coming up here shortly. Glad to have him on Titans Insider and has been reporting on the Tennessee Titans for several years. A long time. Jim's been a big part of this organization. Also, next week we will have Mr. Monday Night himself. Keith Bullock is going to be on the show. Very excited about this, to have Tennessee Titans legend come on with us. Absolutely very excited about it. So check that out next week. But right now, let's jump into the show. We're very excited to have with us today Titans Insider and former Tennessean reporter Jim Wyatt. How you doing, Jim?
I'm doing great. I hope you're doing well today.
Doing great. Very excited to have you on the show and get some of this inside information. Let's jump into the questions here.
All right, Jim. So we know that Corey Davis will miss some time with his hamstring injury. Reports have said he's considered week to week, and he's likely to be there for the opener in Oakland. Do you see Coach Mularkey keeping him out until that week one matchup, or do you think we'll test him out sometime during the preseason?
Well, I think they're going to be very careful with him, because I've been around and seen a lot of guys deal with hamstring injuries, and you try to bring them back too soon, and they set themselves back even further. So I watched him the day that it happened. It happened pretty much right in front of me, and he just kind of came up on after making a catch, just kind of came up, running a little funny and holding himself back. And then you could tell it was bothering him. I think he was worried it was going to be a long-term situation. And, the MRI wasn't quite as bad as he feared, the team feared. So, they're going to be patient with him. I think they'd like to give him some playing time in the preseason up to speed, but I don't think they necessarily feel like they have to, because he's a type of guy that, is physically he can win one-on-one battles, and I think they feel like he's a smart guy who can get up to speed pretty quickly. He wouldn't have to play in the preseason, get ready for the regular season, and the last thing he would do is risk it and set him back even further.
Jim, we signed running back Danny Radcliffe. Do you think this changes the depth chart at all, and what do you think of this signing?
I don't think really at this time at camp and with preseason games, sometimes you make roster moves just to kind of get you through the preseason, and sometimes you do it just to maybe see what a guy has when you start thinking ahead to practice squad spots. I mean, DeMarco Murray's been dealing with a hamstring injury, and I think he'll be limited throughout the preseason, not just because of the injury, but because he just doesn't need a lot of work at this time. So, behind him, Derrick Henry is going to play, but probably not going to use him a whole bunch. So you're down to guys like Kalfani Muhammad, David Llewellyn, Hakeem Judd, who's been around here for a while. I just think Radcliffe joins a rotation of players, and I think as the preseason goes on, especially some of these games, especially week 4 when you're not going to see any of the starters out there, I think you could see somebody like that get extended time and just try to do something to stick around for a practice squad spot.
Speaking of Kalfani Muhammad, we've seen him a lot working out first team at kick returner. It looks like right now he's the kick returner and Adoree Jackson's the punt returner. Do you expect that to be the set going into season?
Well, based on what I saw from Adoree Jackson just the other night, he looks more than capable on both. And can't forget that Eric Weems, they brought him in here to do some of that as well. That's one of the more intriguing spots, because, again, Weems was brought here in March, and I think everybody figured he'd be the guy, and now they drafted a couple of guys who can do it in Muhammad and Jackson. I personally, think Weems still has a chance to make the team, even if he's not the returner, just because he's so good in other areas on special teams. But they might feel safer having him do kicks and having a more explosive guy like Jackson do punt. So, Muhammad's got to make the team in order to win that job, and I don't know that is a given at this point. I mean, I certainly like what I've seen out of him. He's different, but he's running behind David Llewellyn on that depth chart, and he's going to have to do something to show he has more value than just maybe returning kicks on Sundays, because a lot of those kicks, as you guys know, end up being touchbacks anyway. So he's got to make the team to kind of put himself in contention, and I think he still has some work to do.
Which is one of the nice things about the new rule, where you don't have to cut everybody, on a regular basis going through the preseason. It gives these young guys more time to earn that roster spot, so it gives them a chance at least.
Yeah, I think I was glad to see that, and I know John Robinson was glad to see it. I mean, instead of going from 90 to 75, and then you're trying to really make some tough decisions in that final preseason game. Those guys are playing, the bulk of the time, and you're able to save guys. You're able to give guys an extended look for not only a chance to stick here, but for other teams to see them. So I think that was a good move by the league, and I think it's going to give some guys a chance to shine in what maybe is a meaningless preseason game in the eyes of a lot of fans, but certainly not why these guys fighting for spots.
And, and speaking of camp, what's the position group that you've enjoyed watching most this offseason so far?
I think receiver and corner. I'm going to go with both of them just because the receiver, it's always fun to watch these new guys come in and the guys that hadn't been around much. And so until Corey Davis got hurt, I mean, that was fun to see him and see what he's all about. Eric Decker's looked great, throughout camp so far. First time I've really seen him. He was on the field during the mini camp, but he was on the field talking to Malarkey and Robinson in street clothes. So this is the first time we've seen him up close, and he catches the ball well. He's big, physical. He's already developed great chemistry with Marcus Mariota. You can tell. I think a guy like Taywan Taylor has been fun to watch in the off season and certainly in training camp as well. I mean, he was overshadowed by the Davis pick, but Taylor's been really good so far in practices, and I'm interested to see how that all shakes out. We're still waiting on Tajay Sharp to practice. He's dealing with a foot injury. I expect him to kind of make his presence known when he comes back, but there's some stuff to be sorted through there. I mean, Trey McBride, Harry Douglas, a guy from Vanderbilt, and Jonathan Krause, all those guys have had some good practice. A big guy named Mikael McKay, who's a 6'5" receiver who made some plays in the scrimmage on Saturday. He's had his moment. So they've got some things to sort through there, not only from who makes a roster, but who makes a practice squad. And then at corner, so many new faces there, from Logan Ryan to, I mentioned Dory Jackson in the return game, but he's competing. Jonathan Cyprian, Demontre Hurst. They've got a lot of new faces and a lot to be sorted out of that position as well.
Yeah, definitely. Now, from maybe a different position group, is there anything that happened this past week that kind of, took you by surprise as far as, somebody you didn't expect to see or something that stood out to you?
I think, I think guys that you kind of are curious about are starting to get noticed a little more. And I think camp started, and I think a lot of questions were hovering around Kevin Dodd. Just because I hadn't seen him on the field much, and the whole off season he was kind of waiting patiently, and questions about whether he was going to be ready for camp, especially after they signed Eric Walden right before camp started. I think Dodd has been a bit of a pleasant surprise. I mean, I think he's flashed some in these practices, and I think Walden's looked good. So I think that's one development is maybe the team has more depth an outside linebacker than it looked like it was going to have when training camp started.
Jim, over the last several years, very few people have had more insight and more time with the team than you have. Have you noticed a big change in the atmosphere in the John Robinson and Mike Mularkey era?
Yeah, it's completely different than how it was a couple of years ago. I mean, I've been around here long enough to see the good and the bad, and the good from '99 to 2003 when the team went to playoffs 4 times in 5 years, a couple of AFC Championship games, a Super Bowl, and you had guys like Steve McNair and Eddie George and Savon Kearse and Frank Wycheck and Derek Mason and Bruce Matthews. I mean, it was a star-studded group and guys who ran a good locker room of accountable players. And then I saw a stretch from 2004, 2005 when they kind of bottomed out, and when some guys came in here that brought a lot of attention to themselves for reasons other than just playing football, and that time period picked back up, I guess. In recent years when the team went 3-13 and 2-14 in back-to-back years, and I think they had to weed out some players that were more of me first guys instead of team first guys who, when things got bad at the end of the year, I think they were ready for the season to be over with. I really do think that those guys have been weeded out, and that's because Mike Mularkey is not going to tolerate it. It's because John Robinson is not going to tolerate it. And really it's because some of the veterans who've been brought in here, whether it's Brian Arakpo or DeMarco Murray or Ben Jones, I mean, those guys aren't tolerating it either. And they kind of police each other in the locker room. And because of that, I think everybody's with the program. And, if somebody's slacking off, they can get called out. If the guy's not giving a complete effort or is not doing things the way they want to be done, they're going to have to suffer the consequences. And, we've seen that, in roster decisions. We've seen, whether it's a guy like Dorial Green Beckham traded or Sebastian Trushola cut and passing on other players in the draft and free agency. I think they have built a roster where you've got guys that are accountable, and that's resulted in a complete change in culture around here where and I think that's one of the reasons why they're on the upswing.
Who's the one player that's not getting enough attention from the fans? Who should we be looking at that we're not seeing? Who are we missing that we should be watching?
I mean, I think Kevin Byard's one guy that's I think as people know him because he went to MTSU, and people know him because they've talked about him being a playmaker for years to come, but we haven't really seen it. I mean, I think he had a solid rookie year, but he certainly didn't make those game-changing plays like he made at MTSU. I think Kevin Byard becomes more of a household name this year. I think some of the more underrated guys, Daquan Jones on the defensive line, I think is a really good player who gets overlooked because of guys like Darrell Casey. I think on the offensive line, somebody like Quentin Spain gets overlooked because of guys like Taylor Lewan and Jack Conklin. And they've got some under-the-radar players who are good at what they do, and I think they're just going to keep getting better. Those are just 3.
Yeah, which new face to the team, the newest additions, do you think will have the biggest impact on this team, whether it be like an Eric Decker or somebody we drafted like a Corey Davis?
Yeah, I think Decker for sure. I think Davis, as long as he gets healthy, I mean, that's the big thing with him is you got to keep your fingers crossed that he's not going to have setbacks and get behind. He was poised, it looked like, the first week of camp to really start strong. I mean, he was working with the ones, he was making plays in practice, and then now we're just going to have to wait and see. But I think Decker's going to make an impact early on offense. I think Jonathan Cyprian, a couple of guys on defense, newcomers. I think Cyprian, Logan Ryan, those guys are really going to be good in the secondary. I think another guy who kind of under the radar free agency signing was Sylvester Williams, the nose tackle from Denver, who was really slow during the offseason himself because of a lingering ankle injury. I think he's going to quietly, he's going to want to be disruptive in the middle, but he's not going to get a lot of credit because I don't think he's going to get a lot of sacks and those type numbers. But I think he's going to plug the hole. I think he's going to help the defense and allow some other guys around him to make plays. I think he's an underrated guy who not being talked about a lot.
How much pressure does the signing of Eric Walden put on Kevin Dodd?
I don't know that they're competing for roster spots necessarily. I think both of them are going to make it. I think, if anything, I think the signing of Eric Walden, takes some pressure off of, Morgan and Arakpo, and it should bring a little bit of a sense of urgency to Dodd because, he's supposed to be the one heading into year two, being a second-round pick that's changing games, and I think he, obviously had a year of frustration not being able to play much last year because of the foot. I think if he sees Walden coming here being disruptive, I think that's going to motivate him to do more. But just being a Dodd, I get the sense that he's pretty upset and motivated himself just by the way his year went and having football taken away from him for a year. And I don't know that he necessarily needed Walden to drive that point home, but maybe that plays some role in him continuing to work.
Have you noticed any tension in the team when Eric Walden came in just because he was playing for a division rival before?
No, I think people were glad to see him because he did butt heads with Delaney Walker here, in more ways than one, I guess, when he played for the Colts. So no, he had a little bit of a rep because of his exchange during a night game here when the Colts were here. But guys were glad to see him. I think when you looked at this team heading into camp, or at least a week before camp, I think it was easy to say that the pass rush and depth there was a concern because, David Bass left and he helped this team, some last year. He's now with Seattle, but without him, you didn't really have anybody behind Arakpo and Morgan that had any really experience or any real street cred. And you signed a guy like Walden who had 11 sacks last year. I think guys embraced him. I think the offensive line certainly knows what he can do. Even Delaney, who wasn't too certainly didn't send him a Christmas card a couple of years ago. I think even he was glad to see a guy like that come in and help. So I think you put all that stuff aside when you're a team. Jonathan Cyprian was a Jaguar, playing those games against the Titans. They welcomed him in. All these guys kind of compete, and there may be some bad blood at times, but if you can make the team better, you're pretty accepted.
Yeah, that's what it all comes down to. Do they help us win? And speaking of helping us win, we've got, an NFL legend, one of the all-time greats, in Dick LeBeau. How much longer do you see him continue to coach for us? And are we grooming someone to replace him whenever he's done, or is he just going to coach forever?
Well, I watch him in amazement, about every day. He turns 80 years old September the 9th, and the team came on the field Saturday night, and here he is kind of jogging past you like a young man. And he's got a youthful exuberance about him that I think is contagious. And I think I think him being around these young players and young people keeps him with a youthful exuberance about him. I've got him off his wall, kind of a part of his Hall of Fame speech from a couple of years ago, just about how, life is worth living and don't let anybody tell you that age is anything but a number. And, and he's talked about how much satisfaction he's gotten from winning Super Bowls and being inducted into Hall of Fames and some of the things he's done later in life. And that's because he's decided to stick around and not retire. So I think he's going to keep doing it as long as he feels like he's up for it, and they love having him. The players love him. Coach Malarkey, loves having him around. He's a guy players want to play for. He can't coach forever. He said that, he says that every year, and he gets his contract year to year instead of having long-term deals. But, when last season ended, I don't think it really even discussed much about whether he was coming back or not. I think him and Malarkey just kind of gave each other a look, and when they left, and that, hey, I'm coming back, and I expect when this season ends that that if he feels up for it, he'll keep on going. But one of these days, he's gonna hang it up. And as far as who is there to take his place, they've got some guys on staff who I think would be candidates, but I don't think any of them would necessarily want to be considered as someone who is they're ready to take over. I think they're just going to keep working and then maybe would be in line for promotion if he all of a sudden decided one day he's ready to hang it up.
Have you heard anything about the new uniform alterations that they've talked about recently?
I know they're coming, and I've maybe heard just the rumor mill stuff, but not anything that I can necessarily share because I don't think anybody would necessarily want me discussing it. But I haven't seen them at all. I just know that the owner, Aim Adam Strunk, has talked about some of these changes and how they're going to go into effect next year. But people have been pretty tight-lipped around it. It's one of those things that nobody wants to discuss too much because nobody wants to. A, is people don't know a lot about it because nobody's talking much about it. B, you certainly don't want to be leaking anything out about it.
Jim, your whole career has been getting information from the team and giving it out to the public. Have you noticed it being any harder to get information out of John Robinson than it was, say, Rustin Webster?
Well, I will say this. I mean, my job's different now than it was. You guys mentioned I was with the Tennessean, before. It's a different job now than what I used to have. When I was working at the Tennessean all those years, my opinion of a job as a beat guy is you're supposed to be breaking news. You're supposed to tell fans what's going on behind closed doors. You're supposed to, report. You're supposed to be the guy who reports first. Who's getting hired, who's getting fired, who's getting cut. Does the guy have an ACL injury or is an MCL injury, or who's coming in on a tryout? What changes are going to be made on the staff? I mean, all that stuff is the job of a beat guy when you work in a newspaper. And if you don't get that information, then you're not doing your job. And I fought those battles when I was working at the Tennessee and trying to get information out of anybody from Jeff Fisher to Mike Munchak to Ken Wisenhunt, or from Floyd Reese to Mike Reinfeld to Rustin Webster, and some helped you more than others. You got to get, you got to build other sources as well when those guys don't want to tell you anything. I don't have to deal with Robinson from that perspective just because I'm working with the team now. So not that he's a guy that keeps things close to his vest and keeps things quiet for the most part, but I'm not, I'm kind of on a need to know basis with him. And if he wants to share something with me, he'll let me know. I don't necessarily have to text him all the time and call him all the time like I did my other job. I can tell that he's pretty, based on the information that gets out of here now, I can tell he's not showing his cars to too many other people along the way either. So, just judging on, I don't know whether that's the people who are covering the team or him as a GM, but not a lot of stuff is getting out as far as leaks go. So I think that maybe is the answer to the question here. I don't think he's too willing to divulge information as a GM.
And I'm sure the Tennessean misses you. You are naturally recognized as a beat writer for them. And, now you've switched sides kind of. You're one of the guys who's just disseminating the information out there to people. What made you switch from the Tennessean to go work directly for the Titans?
I just think it was a time, it was kind of a perfect time in my life to just kind of make a change. I mean, I loved working at the Tennessean. I love being, a beat guy and because I'm competitive and I love breaking stories and loved being on top of things because I took a lot of pride in trying to get stories first. I grew up reading the Tennessean and worked there when I got out of college, and I loved trying to get the Tennessean recognition by us being on front in Titans news. But that job is a grind if you do it the right way. It's a 24/7 deal. It's a sleep with the phone under your pillow. It's being willing to have dinners interrupted on a regular basis and missing out on the other things because you've got to track down a story even if nothing comes from it. A non-stop, never-ending job if you do it the right way. And as I look forward, I've had to make a decision: do I want to do this for the rest of my life, or have a job where I could work for the team in town and maybe wouldn't have that same kind of pressure and be able to do some. Just, I can still do analysis. I can still do feature stories. I can still cover the team just like I used to. I'm just not having to deal with the grind that I used to. And it just felt like it was the right time for me to have a little bit of a better life from being able to not deal with all the stuff that you have to as a beat guy. Because that beat job guy, again, if you do it the right way, it's a grind and it's life consuming. And I wasn't going to be at the Tennessee and cover it any other way than I did, and that's 24/7. And I didn't want to be doing that for the rest of my life, I guess.
Yeah, you definitely earned it, man, because you were the go-to guy for a very long time.
It's a great organization to work for. They've been very good to me as far as letting me kind of try to do close to the same thing. And again, I'm still writing feature stories. I'm still writing analysis. I'm still going to games. Here I'm covering, stuff I used to cover the paper and more. I mean, we're covering at the Titans Online Super Bowls and Pro Bowls and owners meetings and combines and pro days and a lot of stuff that newspapers don't cover anymore. So in a lot of ways, I mean, I've got a lot more benefits working with the team than I did working with the newspaper.
Jim, for a long time, you've worked with a lot of different players now in the Titans organization. I was going to ask you one current and one former Titan that was just your favorite to sit down and talk to interview.
Yeah, it's Eddie George. I mean, it always comes to mind, just as being one of my all-time favorites just because he's such a classy guy and he continues to live his life the same way. I mean, he's, I still remember the days. I'm kind of looking out my window over the practice field now, and I still remember those days before some of these big playoff games and big games late in the season where he would just get into game mode and would just pace the field, and you could kind of see the look in his eyes and on his face, what it meant to him. And he just always handled himself with such class. I mean, Steve McNair was one of my all-time favorites too. I mean, and it's a shame he's no longer with us. He was a stand-up guy, toughest guy you ever be around. Wouldn't practice a lot of weeks, would still play, talk to the media every day. Would be out in the community helping kids and do a lot of things that he didn't want attention for, but he did it anyway. There were so many guys during that era, and I could go on and on about memorable players. I hate to slight some by just naming those two, but those two definitely stand out to me. And then, current guys, I mean, it's a great locker room now. And, I think, a guy like Marcus Mariota reminds me so much of Steve McNair just by the way he handles himself and is not blaming people when things go wrong and works hard and you watch him communicate and with the fans and how gracious he is. I mean, he's a rare guy, especially at that position. And I'm hoping one day, his career will go long like Steve McNair's was, where people will be able to look back at him the same way about being one of all-time greats. He certainly has, the makeup for it and certainly has the right mindset and attitude. So I hope his career carries on the same way as some of those other guys I just mentioned.
Yeah, Eddie is definitely on our Mount Rushmore of former players that we want to interview. We've got some pretty good interviews from some of these guys, but Eddie's right up there. And as we try to move into more of the current players, Marcus is obviously the guy that everybody wants to talk to and hear from, just because he is a lot like you said. He comes off a lot like Steve, where it's going to be all right. We're just going to keep working. Everybody's going to be fine. Just do your part, and everything's going to work out.
Yeah, and I think one thing that kind of speaks to how he is and how similar he is to McNair is I did a story, on Michelle McNair and her two boys about Steve when he went to the Tennessee Sports Hall of Fame last year, and she said she was watching, an interview that Mariota did on television with her boys in the room, and she kind of stopped him and said, "Hey, watch him and how he handles himself." And this is how your dad used to do. And, he's giving credit to other people. He's not blaming guys when things don't go well. And this is how you're supposed to do it. And she recognized that after seeing her husband do it for so many years. And he's a guy that, is a great representative for the organization. There's no doubt. And as long as he can stay healthy and they keep surrounding him with good players, he's got a chance to be a great one.
Yeah, that has the same vibe to him. One more question about John Robinson. What's the most surprising move that he's made since he came into the organization? What shocked you that he did, or just you didn't see coming at all?
Well, it's so he's gotten now because he's done so much stuff that it's almost nothing surprises you with him. I mean, it was back in the day. People would ask you see the Titans making a trade for DeMarco Murray, or you think there's a chance the Titans to trade the number one pick, or with the chances the Titans doing this and that, and you probably pretty much say, no, I doubt that's going to happen, just because it's never been done before. And then he comes in and he trades for DeMarco Murray, which was kind of shows you what he was right out of the gate. That was a surprise. And then he trades the number one, gets quite a haul that ends up leading him, getting Jack Conklin and then getting Corey Davis this year. I mean, he's made so many moves, from those two to trading DGB last year, a move some people questioned, early, but aren't questioning anymore since they extended Dennis Kelly, endorsed Drew Green Beckham, still looking for a job. I mean, he's been very bold in a lot of moves, and I think the first two, the DeMarco Murray trade, and I think the trading the number one pick, the two that jump out at me the most. But he's been very active, and he's talked about his dad, growing up on the farm, down in West Tennessee, trading tractors and hunting dogs and equipment, and said he kind of watched him as a young boy make some of those moves. He's kind of carried it over, to some degree on the NFL, just dealing with high-priced players and certainly a high-pressure business.
I got one more question for you. And there's probably more off-season hype surrounding this team right now than I can ever remember. So, in your opinion, how likely is this team to end the 8-year drought and finally get back to the playoffs?
Well, I think it's got a great chance, but you got to stay healthy. I mean, that's the biggest thing. I mean, right now, I think looking at the team and looking at the division and looking at how things have changed around here, I think the Titans have got a great chance to contend and win the AFC South, and then getting into the playoffs. And you never know what can happen. But if something happens, if something should happen to Mariota, or something should happen to other key players, the whole season will look different. So you just got to keep your fingers crossed that you can stay healthy. And you got to win close games. And that's one thing that this team did last year that had not been happening around here in recent years. Is they won a game against Detroit late on a touchdown. They kick a 53-yard field goal and beat Kansas City on the last play of the game. Beat Denver here when you get a stop, on a strip and fumble recovery late. I mean, you got to win those games. And most of the time, these games in the NFL coming down the last series or two. And I think this team kind of found a way to win last year, and now they've got to carry that over. And I think the mindset is different. The personnel's better, the depth's better. Should be in a position to win, but you got to do it. I mean, should have been in a position to go to the playoffs last year and lose down in Jacksonville, and not because the quarterback got hurt, because that game was going the wrong way even before that happened. I mean, you got to take care of business in games you're supposed to win, and you got to do that week in and week out. And it's a tough start. I mean, the schedule out of the gate: Raiders at Jacksonville, Seattle coming in here, at Houston, at Miami. That's a tough 5-game stretch before the Colts come in, and then the Titans haven't been the Colts in a long, long time. So you got to survive the start, and then you got to be consistent. You got to stay healthy.
Thanks, Jim. A lot for coming on. Jim Wyatt, everybody, Titans insider, long time with the team. It was a lot of fun talking to you, and we hope this isn't the last time we have you on the show.
Okay, yeah, just reach out to me. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Thanks a lot, Jim.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, appreciate it.
We want to say thanks again to Jim Wyatt for coming on the show with us. It was an honor to have him on and an absolute pleasure to get some of his inside stuff. But before we get out of here, we want to remind everyone, be sure to check out the raffle still going on. You can purchase raffle tickets at our online store, ttupodcast.com/store. You can find everything really going on with our podcast there on that ttupodcast.com site.
Buying these raffle tickets will enter you in a chance to win a spot on our fantasy football league, a shout out on the show, you coming on the show to give your season predictions with us, or the big prize, Week 9 tickets to the Ravens at Titans game at Nissan Stadium.
It's only $2 for a ticket, $3 for 5, or 10 for 10. Definitely worth buying a ticket. Well, that'll be going on just for a little bit longer, only a week or two before we pull names. And we have Keith Bullock on next week, probably the most exciting information that we're going to throw at you today. Very excited about this. Absolute honor to have a guy like that on. A Tennessee Titans legend like Keith Bullock on the show is absolutely fantastic. Matt did a lot of hard work to get him on. So if you see Matt on Twitter or Facebook, throw a little love his way because he's the one that set that up completely. That was all him. But as always, thanks to all you awesome fans out there that make this show possible. Thanks to my co-hosts, Matt and Glenn, for making this show fun to come on. We'll be back next Wednesday as we are each and every week and ramping up towards this season. And, man, I'm excited. I'm ready to go, and I know these two guys are too. So with that being said, everybody tighten up.
Thanks for listening to the Two-Tone Uncensored podcast. You can listen to the show at twotoneuncensored.podbean.com or by downloading the Podbean app on your mobile device. Be sure to follow the show on Twitter at Two-Tone Uncensored and like us on Facebook.